I supposed to stop the end of the world?
In 1959, in Lexington, Massachusetts, the elementary school is preparing to celebrate the day of its opening. Teacher Miss Taylor tells her class about the main event of the occasion, the burial of a time capsule. Miss Taylor suggests that the students draw their visions of the future and informs them that all drawings will be placed in the capsule, which will be opened by other children in 50 years. The students enthusiastically start working and depict robots and spaceships. It's time to submit their works, and Miss Taylor approaches a strange girl named Lucinda Embry. Lucinda pays no attention to the teacher and continuously fills the sheet with a series of numbers dictated to her by a persistent whisper in her head. The teacher takes the work from the frightened and bewildered Lucinda, who clearly hasn't finished it yet. So what would you write or draw for future generations? Share your ideas in the comments. The next day, during the celebration, Lucinda disappears, and teachers and the police begin searching for the girl. Soon, Miss Taylor finds her in a storage room with her fingers injured and horrified to see how tormented by voices Lucinda is scratching mysterious numbers onto the door with her nails.
Please, make them stop whispering.
It's 2009. 50 years have passed. Widow Professor John Koestler lives with his son Caleb, who has a hearing impairment and teaches astrophysics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. After another lecture about the structure of the universe, John rushes to Caleb's school for the 50th anniversary celebration, where they'll open that very time capsule. Modern students go through the past drawings, and Caleb gets Lucinda Embry's work. The boy looks thoughtfully at the mysterious numbers that cover the entire sheet and suddenly starts hearing strange whispers. Moreover, Caleb notices a mysterious figure in the distance that disappears after a couple of seconds. In the evening, Caleb does his homework and tells his father that his hearing device has started making strange sounds, but his father doesn't pay much attention to it. Soon, John learns that Caleb took Lucinda's message with him. The boy is very curious about what all these numbers mean, but John insists that the work must be returned to the school. After putting his son to bed, John decides to investigate the intriguing set of numbers on his own. He writes down several numbers and tries to figure out what they could possibly mean. After a while, John deciphers the first combination, the date of the September 11 incident, and the number of casualties during it.
What the hell is this?
Stunned by the eerie coincidence, John transcribes all the numbers onto his board and searches for information about the other dates. In horror, he discovers that all the dates mentioned in Lucinda's work were marked by major disasters, one of which resulted in John losing his wife. But the worst part is that 3 of the catastrophes are yet to occur. Would you try to prevent such terrible events, or would you accept the inevitable? Share your thoughts in the comments. The next day, John meets with his friend and colleague Phil Beckman and tells him about his discovery. John also informs Phil that the next catastrophe is supposed to happen tomorrow and it will claim 81 lives. Phil is skeptical of his friend's insane theory, but John continues to argue his point and claims that he hasn't found a single mistake in the message. Then Phil notices that there are still many unchecked numbers on the sheet, which apparently don't mean anything. In that case, all the other numbers could also be meaningless. However, John is sure that all of this can't be a coincidence and decides to thoroughly examine Lucinda's grim predictions. John visits Lucinda's former teacher, Miss Taylor, and inquires about the day they buried the time capsule. Miss Taylor, who despite showing signs of Alzheimer's disease, tells John about Lucinda's strange behavior on that day, and John asks where he can find her. But the woman disappoints John, stating that Lucinda passed away several years ago. Later, while playing in the yard, Caleb hears the persistent whisper again and soon notices a car with strangers. The boy approaches the car, and the mysterious person hands him a dark stone. John notices his son near the unknown car and scolds him for talking to strangers. The next day, a storm rages, and Caleb calls his father to pick him up. John sets out, but gets stuck in traffic due to a minor accident. Suddenly, he notices the coordinates of his location and realizes that he's familiar with this combination of numbers. Puzzled, John takes out the list of dates and finally understands that all the unchecked numbers are coordinates of places where disasters are supposed to happen. And right now, he is at the epicenter of the next predicted catastrophe. John gets out of the car and approaches the police officers to find out when the traffic will resume. At that moment, Lucinda's terrifying prediction comes true. Shocked, John runs towards the blazing wreckage, hoping to save someone, but it's impossible. By evening, a shaken John returns home, where his sister Grace is waiting to look after Caleb. As he enters the house, John hears news reporting 81 casualties in a plane crash. Just as Lucinda's message predicted, John doesn't want to discuss what happened with his sister and goes to sleep. Caleb notices his father's strange behavior and tries to find out what happened, but John doesn't want to tell the truth, and a hurt Caleb retreats to his room. At night, John is visited by his friend Phil, who is starting to doubt the randomness of the indicated numbers. John tells Phil that there are 2 more disasters to come and believes it's a sign and a warning for him. Phil urges John not to risk his life and not to try to prevent the inevitable.
Right now, my scientific mind is telling me to have nothing more to do with this.
Meanwhile, the mysterious stranger appears right in Caleb's room and shows him a vision of a terrifying fire that is apparently about to happen. Terrified, Caleb sees the fire engulfing the entire forest and even their house, and he screams in horror. John rushes to his son and comforts him, assuring him that it's just a bad dream. But suddenly, John notices the stranger near their house and immediately rushes out to the yard, hoping to chase the stranger away, but finds no one. The next day, John and Caleb drive to Lucinda's daughter's house, Diane, after finding out her address. John sees Diane and her daughter Abby getting into a car and starts following them. They end up at a zoological museum, and John instructs Caleb to look at the same exhibits Abby is checking out, while he strikes up a conversation with Diane. Later, John suggests Diane and her daughter join them at a cafe, where they continue their conversation. Soon, John admits that their meeting wasn't coincidental and asks Diane if her mother had any special gift, but a frightened Diane refuses to discuss this and leaves with Abby. In the evening, John finds out where the next catastrophe will occur and calls the FBI to warn them about the danger. On the day of the catastrophe, John drops Caleb off at Grace and asks her not to let him watch the news. Then John heads to the coordinates of the presumed disaster and tries to understand what will happen this time. John enters the city subway and notices a suspicious man who, he thinks, might be carrying the bomb. John chases him, moving from one car to another, only to find out that the man is just a petty thief. But at that moment, one of the trains derails and crashes into the train John is in at a breakneck speed. Miraculously, John survives, but the horrific accident claims the lives of 178 people, just as Lucinda predicted. In the evening, John and Caleb return home and suddenly see Diane and Abby at the doorstep. Diane tells John that her mother frequently mentioned the date of the last catastrophe and claimed that it was the day Diane's life would be cut short. Together with their children, John and Diane go to Lucinda's abandoned house and discover numerous newspaper clippings on the walls about many tragic events from the list. Among the clippings, John suddenly notices a copy of M.I.T's Miriam engraving depicting the prophet Ezekiel gazing at a great sun and a mysterious spinning wheel called Chariot Vision. Moreover, John finds the same strange stones in Lucinda's room as the one Caleb received from the Whisperers. Then John finds the scratched words everyone else repeated many times and realizes that after the date of the last catastrophe, there are not the numbers 33, but the reversed letters E's. John guesses that this catastrophe will be so global that it will extinct the entire population of the planet. Meanwhile, the eerie whisper beings approach the car where Caleb and Abby are. The children are tormented by endless whispers, and suddenly Abby decides to get out of the car. Caleb tries to stop her and immediately alerts their parents. Frightened, John and Diane run towards their children, and Abby calmly reveals that the whisper beings offered them to go with them. Back home, John and Diane share their feelings about the impending end of the world, but realize they're powerless to change anything. In the morning, John sees Abby coloring the sun in the engraving of Ezekiel, and he has an epiphany. John rushes to M.I.T. observatory and tells Phil that a massive solar flare is about to occur in the solar system, and a wave of radiation will destroy all life on Earth.
Okay, you're officially scaring the shit out of me right now.
Diana arrives at John's place in desperation and confesses that she always knew her mother was right. She hopes that by hiding underground, they might have a chance to survive, and suggests that John go with her to the caves she used to play in as a child, which few people know about. John and Diana return home and quickly prepare for the journey. John decides to call his father, a priest he hasn't spoken to in a long time, and tells him about the horrifying prophecy. John asks his father, along with his mother and Grace, to hide underground, but his father claims he won't resist his fate. Meanwhile, Caleb hears voices again and unconsciously starts writing down numbers just like Lucinda did. Finally, John and Diana, along with the kids, get into the car and head towards the caves. However, John's plans unexpectedly change. He arrives at the school and goes downstairs to find the door where Lucinda had scratched the coordinates of the last catastrophe. But the numbers on the door have long been painted over, and John tears the door off its hinges and takes it with him back home. Diana thinks John is acting foolish and pleads with him to hurry to the caves, but John intends to figure out the missing coordinates. While John scrapes off the paint from the door, Diana puts the children in her car and drives to the caves without John. Finally, John figures out the coordinates of the catastrophe's epicenter, but he notices that Diana and the kids have left, so he sets out to find them. Diana stops at a gas station and sees an emergency news broadcast on TV, talking about solar flares and urging people to stock up and stay home. At the same time, Caleb gets out of the car and calls his father. Diana snatches the phone from him and tells John that she must take the kids to a safe place. But John argues that they need to be at Lucinda's house, as he found its coordinates on the door. He also claims that the caves won't save them anyway, as the radiation will penetrate the Earth's crust. While Diana argues with John, the whisper beings appear again nearby, taking the children with them. Diana chases after them in a stolen car, and soon her mother's prediction about her demise comes true. John arrives at the accident site and, bidding farewell to Diana, notices the same mysterious stone in her hand. Next, he heads to Lucinda's house, hoping to find the children there. Near the house, he discovers many similar stones, and then he sees the fourth whisper beings. Furious, John demands his son back, but they respond with silence. Suddenly, out of the woods, calm Caleb appears with a white rabbit in his arms. John wants to take him away from here, but Caleb insists they're going with the whisper beings along with Abby. Soon, Abby emerges with the same rabbit, saying she already knows her mom is safe. Caleb tells his father that the whisper beings have been protecting them all along and have now come to save them. Just then, a massive interstellar arc appears in the sky, approaching Earth. John looks up in shock, and Caleb says it's time to go, as they've been chosen to start over. Caleb takes his father's hand and approaches the spaceship. However, the Whisper Man tells Caleb that his father can't join them because he's never heard their call. The bewildered boy refuses to leave Earth without his father, but John realizes it's the only way to save his son, and he convinces Caleb to go with Abby. John promises he'll never abandon Caleb and assures him that there will be a time when they'll be together again and reunite with their mom. Still, Caleb heads toward the ship and suddenly sees the whisper beings change their appearance. No longer resembling humans, they extend their hands, inviting them on an incredible journey. Caleb says goodbye to his father, and they all ascend on a mysterious device resembling the rotating wheel from the engraving, rising to the gigantic interstellar arc. The arc continues to move away from Earth, and soon we see that it's one of many similar arcs, departing with chosen people to another planet. The shaken father tries to come to terms with his sorrow and falls asleep, exhausted, right on the street. The next day, fires engulf the city, foreshadowing the impending end. Panic and chaos fill the streets. John decides to spend his final hours with his family and heads to his parents' home in Boston. Grace greets him at the doorstep, asking about Caleb's whereabouts. John replies that he's now safe. He enters the living room and finally embraces his father, then the whole family.
This isn't the end, son.
I know.
And in that moment, a horrific wave of fire engulfs the entire Earth, instantly destroying everything in its path. Meanwhile, Caleb and Abby, with their rabbits, find themselves on a heavenly planet. The children watch as the Whisper Being's ship takes off, then run towards a massive tree resembling the Tree of Life. This was the movie Knowing. It's striking how the disaster systematically brought the world to its end, yet one still hopes that in real life, humanity will be more fortunate. And I hope the chosen ones will manage to build a better world than what we had on Earth. What do you think? Is everything really predetermined in the world, or are all events just a series of coincidences? Let's discuss this interesting question in the comments.